Coming up on Chapman News, the race for the White House. We'll have the very latest. They don't call it a nail-biter election for nothing. Election anxiety hits Americans hard. All eyes on us, how the world is reacting to the 2020 election.
From Dodge College of Film and Media Arts, this is Chapman News.
Welcome back to another edition of Chapman News. First, the latest on the presidential race. As we come on the air, Joe Biden is on the cusp of being elected the 46th president of the United States. All day, we've been looking at 4 states: Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. But the real contest is in Pennsylvania. If Joe Biden wins the state's 20 electoral votes, he will have exceeded the magic number of 270 electoral votes and will be declared president. Let's go to Jasmine Sani with more.
The votes aren't all counted yet, but the latest votes coming in are mail-in ballots, which generally favor Democrats. This explains how Biden has now come ahead in Pennsylvania, where those votes are coming from Democratic strongholds like Philadelphia. Biden continues to lead in Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, but Biden's ahead by only thousands of votes in Georgia, and there will be a recount there. Despite the late news, it appears that Donald Trump won't go quietly. After not appearing for 2 days, the president took the stage in the White House briefing room last night to contest the current election results and accuse his opponents of fraud, calling them a corrupt Democratic machine.
Going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land, we'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this.
But the president's charges were dismissed all across the political spectrum, by Democrats and Republicans alike. The president's chief supporters remain his family. Joe Biden will make an address to the nation during primetime tonight. Election night has now turned into election week, keeping the nation on edge. Jenna Perry recaps the last few days.
In the early hours of Wednesday morning, President Trump held a press conference at the White House, prematurely declaring himself the winner with millions of ballots yet to be counted.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Projected results slowly trickled in throughout Wednesday, beginning with Trump pulling ahead in Georgia and Pennsylvania. But Biden has made up ground in both states since Wednesday. Later that day, Biden held slim leads in several key swing states, leaving Trump only a few paths to reach 270. Projected results declared Biden flipping Michigan and Wisconsin, 2 states that were vital to Trump's victory in 2016. The results were met with legal challenges from the Trump campaign, asking for a recount. Chapman campaigns and elections professor Fred Smoller weighed in on the president's reaction.
It's will be his political epitaph. The last thing he's going to assert is that there are only 2 outcomes to the election: either I win or it was stolen, and there's no evidence of the latter.
As the race comes down to the wire, ballots are still being counted in Nevada and Arizona, where Biden takes the lead. Early Thursday morning, Trump protested the lengthy count, tweeting, "Any vote that came in after Election Day will not be counted." Many of his tweets have since been flagged for misleading information.
So they've always put accuracy above timeliness. This is a complete false deadline.
Biden's margins are much thinner than national polls predicted, many expecting Trump's chaotic COVID-19 response to be his downfall.
What the election is showing is that there are 2 schools of thought about what's the greatest threat to America. One school of thought is that the virus is the greatest threat. The other school of thought, the Trump school, is that the damage to the economy is the greater threat.
The 2020 election has proved unprecedented in many ways, Biden breaking the record for the popular vote with more than 70 million.
In one way, we've reaffirmed democracy. We had a very healthy turnout, probably an unprecedentedly high turnout. One of the great things about the election is just this outstanding turnout by people between 18 and 29. If Biden does pull out a victory, he'll have 18 to 29-year-olds to thank.
For Chapman News, I'm Jenna Perry.
Thanks, Jenna. The effects of the election are far from over. And with the prospect of lawsuits and court action ahead, many voters are anxious. And as Nicole Zedek reports, that anxiety may have started months ago.
Millions of Americans are on edge, and they've been feeling this way for months now.
There's something called anticipatory anxiety, which is what has been going on now for a few weeks, not knowing what this day or this outcome is going to be like.
A recent report from the American Psychological Association found nearly 70% of Americans say the presidential election is a significant source of stress. And this is bipartisan, with 76% Democrats and 67% Republicans reporting election anxiety. This stress can manifest in multiple ways as people have different reactions to election outcomes.
For some, they do go into that sort of fight or flight mode where they want to do something and take action, sometimes in a not always a healthy way.
In preparation for possible unrest, cities across the country boarded up shops and businesses before the election. Multiple cities enlisting the help of the National Guard as well. Chapman Student Psychological Counseling Services offered post-election day therapy, and Chapman has also hired 6 new interns, citing an increase in appointment requests since March.
We are stressed. We are months into a pandemic, and it's really pushed everybody to the limit.
Waiting in lines, wearing a mask, and being isolated from others all add to the stress of daily life. But is this added stress a part of our new normal?
I would hope that we're able to adapt to figuring out how to manage all these uncomfortable feelings and all of this stress. I really hope the new normal does not involve this level of distress.
To help cope with distress, Dr. Chase recommends taking care of yourself by exercising, socializing with friends and family, and seeking professional help if needed. For Chapman News, I'm Nicole Zedek.
Thanks, Nicole. That widespread anxiety has manifested itself into many different forms, including a dramatic increase in gun sales. Colette No has a report.
Americans braced for social unrest for months leading up to the election. New data reveals that from January to September, gun sales skyrocketed to a record high of 16.7 million. That's a 66% increase from last year.
This cycle of unpredictability is bringing people here into AIDS gun shops.
It's uncomparable to anything we saw, even when Obama was taking office in 2009. And as soon as that pandemic hit, and as soon as the food was running off the shelves in the grocery stores, everybody turned to weapons.
The surge of gun purchases is also due to a new rush of first-time gun buyers.
It's important to have a firearm. It's important to exercise your constitutional rights as an American.
The modern gun market has widened to now include more minorities and women.
And a lot of these women are business owners. They're doctors, nurses, real estate, your everyday grandmother. They are afraid of this upheaval.
What would you say is the biggest issue amid all of the social unrest that made you purchase a gun?
I would have to say the lawlessness. That was something that didn't sit well with me. I decided, the best thing for me to do is to make sure I'm prepared.
Amid panic due to COVID-19 and election anxiety, there's also a shortage of ammunition.
There's none, zero to be found.
I ended up having to go back to that same store, I want to say 3 to 4 times.
And politics plays a huge role in the gun business.
So we're waiting now for if Biden takes in office, there's going to be a humongous surge once again because he is not for guns.
In a time of political uncertainty, Atkinson says increased gun sales are likely to continue until the rest of this year. For Chapman News, I'm Colette No.
And to help us digest and understand the Electoral College is Dr. Lori Cox Hahn, a presidency scholar at Chapman University. Dr. Hahn, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So in Georgia, it's an incredibly tight race with 99% of the votes in. And in the Libertarian Party, Joe Jorgensen has 1.2% of the vote in the state. That said, how much of an impact does voting for a third party have on the election outcome?
It does when the vote is this close. It's similar to what happened in Florida in 2000 because you had two smaller party candidate, minor party candidates, Ralph Nader and Pat Buchanan, who took some of the vote. And the official tally in Florida was 537 votes. But obviously, when the margin between the two major party candidates is so small, and you have a third party candidate getting way more than that, then that's going to make people talk about that aspect of it.
And going off of that, political experts have predicted that there are 9 scenarios in which Biden will win, 3 in which Trump will win, and 1 in which the two will tie. As a political scholar, how do you see the results playing out?
Right now, we don't know for sure, or at least we don't know officially, but it looks like Joe Biden will prevail.
Mm-hmm. And no matter the election outcome, it seems half of the country will likely consider the results fraudulent. What kind of impact will this have on U.S. history and democracy at large?
I think the bigger issue right now isn't so much who prevails in terms of the Electoral College, who was sworn in as president on January 20th. It's the fact that, like you said, half the country is going to see this as illegitimate, whether it is or not. And so whoever is president, and it's looking more likely that it will be Joe Biden, the biggest challenge that he will face is being able to reach out across the aisle and to regain the trust of the American public in terms of the governing that has to take place.
And Dr. Hahn, thank you so much for sharing your election expertise with Chapman News, and we do look forward to having you back in the future.
So do I. Thanks.
As ballots continue to be counted in battleground states, Chapman News will keep you updated when election results roll in. I'm Jasmine Sani. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Jasmine. Now, looking locally, Lindsay Arabian has the latest on local elections. Lindsay.
From the national level to the local level, every vote counts. Here are some of California's biggest proposition decisions from 2020. Prop 16, which would have repealed a constitutional provision that made it unlawful to discriminate against people based on race, ethnicity, national origin, or sex, failed. Prop 17, which restores voting rights to felons upon completion of prison term, passed. Prop 20, which would have recategorized certain types of theft and fraud crimes just as chargeable as misdemeanors or felonies, failed. Prop 21, which would have expanded cities' abilities to implement rent control, failed. Prop 22, which classified app-based drivers as contractors and not employees, passed. The city of Orange also saw local elections this week concerning the mayor and 4 city council seats. Mark A. Murphy was once again re-elected as mayor, winning by almost a 20-point difference. Ariana Barrios was elected to City Council District 1 here in Orange. John Dimitru to District 2, Mike Alvarez to District 3, and Ana Gutierrez to District 5. Representative Katie Porter of California's 45th District also won her re-election. This is Lindsay Arabian reporting for Chapman News.
Coming up on Chapman News, as the virus surges, how do the candidates plan to stop it? And we'll take a look at what the rest of the world thinks of the U.S. election. A grim milestone for the country this week, the U.S. recording more than 121,000 new cases yesterday, breaking the record of 100,000 from just a day ago. The pandemic, unsurprisingly, a big part of the presidential race. While the official results are yet to be announced, our reporter Adriana Ferrari investigates each candidate's COVID-19 plan and what that means for the pandemic. Adriana?
The most pressing issue for Biden voters is COVID-19. And Biden has pledged a very different approach than Donald Trump. I spoke with our medical expert, Dr. Jerica Lamb, about how each candidate would influence the trajectory of COVID-19.
I think the pandemic definitely plays a big factor in the results of what's going on with regards to the Electoral College.
The day after the election, also breaking COVID-19 records, with 117,000 new infections being reported, the highest daily record for the country.
We believe that it could be due to the super spreader public events that the president held in various Midwestern states.
Despite being criticized for the lack of a pandemic plan, the president continuing with his plan to reopen the country. The White House's Opening America site lists a 3-phase strategy that leaves individual states with no specific guidelines.
Even though he got infected and he supposedly learned from it, but there was no plan to move forward to really give us some kind of infrastructure for public health.
Biden's plan is a bit more robust, although specifics of the plan are still unannounced. The 5 main objectives include restoring trust and credibility to the White House, creating an effective national emergency response to COVID-19, eliminating cost barriers to COVID-19 treatment and testing, implementing economic measures for those affected, and rallying the world to confront these and future crises. Many trusting Biden to take the pandemic more seriously following his handling of the Ebola and H1N1 viruses during his vice presidency.
We are confident that he's going to model his pandemic approach to how he was conducting it with former President Obama, where they actually really hustled and really strategically maneuvered many resources and really worked together with other countries to bring down the Ebola pandemic.
For Chapman News, I'm Adriana Ferrari.
The coronavirus continues to take on the world. Over 48.3 million cases have been reported globally, with more than 1.23 million lives lost. Italy announcing its lockdown of 6 regions this week, drawing criticism from businesses and citizens who fear for the nation's economy falling into continued down spiral. England experiencing a second lockdown which will last 4 weeks. Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying that there is no alternative. Citizens that breach restrictions will face fines up to £10,000. But this week, the pandemic has been temporarily overshadowed by the U.S. election. International media outlets calling the race a nail-biter. I took a closer look at what the rest of the world thinks of the 2020 election. Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage rings true today as the whole world watches and reports on the U.S. presidential election. While many Americans are shocked by the tight race this year, international analysts take a broader approach to watching the results.
Elections have been close. Well, the first couple of elections in American history were terribly close. All of this didn't matter as much as long as the presidency was not a very powerful position. 19th century presidents weren't very powerful, but they are now.
Europe's still on edge as the U.S. election continues to drag on. European diplomats fearing the costly effects that Trump's re-election would have on transatlantic relationships. This fear is only heightened by the U.S.'s turbulent involvement with NATO alliances over the past 3.5 years.
But Germany is totally controlled by Russia, because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not.
Politically and economically wedged between China and the U.S.'s formidable powers, Taiwan, or officially known as the Republic of China, holds its breath on the election's razor-thin outcome. Running parallel with America's red versus blue, Taiwan's 2 dominant political parties have their bets on differing candidates. Progressive Party members hope for Trump's re-election because of his tough-on-China policies, which they view as advantageous to the party's goal of separation from mainland China. However, the KMT, commonly referred to as the Chinese Nationalist Party, fears for Trump's continued disruptive effect on the East Asian island. I won't side with Trump because Biden shares multiple goals with other countries. He could rejoin the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the WHO, and the Paris Climate Agreement. This fits Taiwan's interests. In the end, whoever is declared the next president of the United States is bound to make social, political, and economic waves in the world. And coming up, while we were looking at the polls, Hurricane Eta took its toll on South America. And 3 weeks of sports practice without equipment or contact. We'll have your latest Chapman Sports Update coming up.
Today I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars.
Really tall.
I'm a rocket structural engineer, designing and building parts of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands?
Yes.
You can become a rocket scientist or whatever else you want to be.
Hurricane Eta hit South America this week, leaving massive flooding and destruction behind. Florida could be next. Barbara Fox has more on your weather update.
Tropical storm Eta ripped through Central America this week. Although Eta weakened after making landfall, it re-emerged over the warm Caribbean waters as it moved east towards Honduras. If it doesn't weaken again, the storm will hit South Florida on Monday. And from southern Florida to southern California, we can also expect some showers this weekend. Currently it's 76 and partly cloudy here in Orange, but don't expect the sunshine to stick around. Before I head over and show you our local forecasts, let's see what's happening across the country. Up in Seattle, Washington, it's 51 degrees. Down in San Francisco, it's 57, and it's going to be 87 in Vegas. As we head over to the Midwest, it's going to be 74 in Denver, Colorado. Heading further down to Texas, you better put away your long sleeves because it's going to be a high of 82 degrees. Temperatures in Minneapolis and Chicago are similar, staying in the 70s. As we move south towards Atlanta, it's going to be similar temperatures. Up in Washington, D.C., it's 72 degrees and 69 degrees up in New York. Taking a look at our 7-day forecast, it's going to be cloudy with a storm brewing on Saturday and Sunday. But temperatures will slowly be rising throughout the week with the high of 67 on Thursday. This is your local and national weather forecast. I'm Barbara Fox. Here with your local and national sports is Aaron Coogan. Aaron?
Thanks, Barbara. I'm Aaron Coogan, and welcome back to the Best Campus Sports Show. With all the anxiety and confusion surrounding this week in the election, I'm going to make sports as comprehensible as possible. As a matter of fact, let's make it as easy as 1, 2, and 3. We'll start off with 1. The number 1 ranked Clemson Tigers continue to lead the Atlantic Coast Conference with a spotless 7-0 record. But with Trevor Lawrence still awaiting clearance from last week's positive COVID-19 test and confirmation of his absence in tomorrow night's face-off against Notre Dame, the Tigers' spot at the top may come to an end. On top of that, because Lawrence won't be competing in arguably the biggest game of the season, many sports analysts are saying he's no longer a favorite for taking home this year's Heisman Trophy. Freshman DJ Uiagalelei will be taking the snap for Clemson tomorrow at 4:30.
So I think Clemson can win with their backup quarterback. He's extremely talented. He's been very poised, and they got a great defense. I think Clemson absolutely has a chance without Trevor.
Let's move on to 2, as in tomorrow. Saturday, November 7th marks the Pac-12's long-awaited 2020 football season debut. This year, teams will compete with a shortened in-conference schedule, playing only 6 regular season games and then a championship week 7. Grab your snacks and get ready for a good time tomorrow as all 12 teams will be playing. And finally, we've made it to 3. Today marks the end of Chapman Athletics' 3rd week into no contact, no equipment practices. There are still 0 reported cases within the program, and teams will likely be able to return to regular practices this upcoming week. With more on Chapman's reintegration on sports, I'm Aaron Coogan, and I'll see you next week on the Best Campus Sports Show.
Need something to de-stress from the election? We'll have your entertainment report coming up.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Hello and welcome back to Entertainment. I'm your host, Maddie Fabricant, and it's been a big week to say the least, so let's get started. Netflix is making big waves in the news this week, announcing that they will be raising the price of their online subscription. This is the biggest increase in price since the start of the streaming giant. Netflix saying that the rise in price is to stay competitive in the streaming wars. I find myself continuously wondering if eventually we'll need a United Nations for the streaming worlds, so that Netflix and HBO Max can peacefully coexist. And sad news this week as beloved James Bond actor Sean Connery tragically passed away on Halloween. Connery died at age 90 in the Bahamas. His wife spoke to the Daily Mail saying he had dementia and it took its toll on him, also adding that he got his final wish to slip away without any fuss. In honor of our first James Bond, let us know what your favorite in the series is. Is it From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever, or is it a newer Bond film? Tell us in the comments below or on our social media platforms, @Chapman News. As 2020 comes to a close, it does not seem to be getting any better for Ellen DeGeneres. The television host facing more controversy this week after tweeting about her Halloween costume. While some healthcare professionals appreciated the gesture, other Twitter users were quick to criticize the show's mistreatment of staff. Insider noting how ironic the costume is, saying that Ellen became one of 2020's biggest villains. And Ellen isn't the only one in the hot seat this week, as Anne Hathaway's latest role in The Witches has prompted backlash among people with disabilities. Her character not having 5 fingers and toes, resembling a disability in which a person is born with a split hand. The Paralympic Games expressing their concern that the film might contribute to bullying amongst people with limb differences. Limb difference is not scary. Differences should be celebrated and disability has to be normalized. Everyone, please stay safe out there. We'll be back next week to bring you the latest in entertainment. I'm Maddie Fabricant. Back to you, Melissa.
And that's all for our show for today. Thank you for tuning in. You can keep up to date with all of our stories by following our social media at Chapman News and by subscribing to our YouTube channel at chapmannews.tv. From Taipei, Taiwan, I'm Melissa Cho. We'll see you next week.